So earlier this year, news broke that the Pentagon had failed its 7th consecutive audit. Hey, not everybody's good at numbers, right? I'm certainly not. But then I thought, maybe I would not be a distinct failure as an economist when I considered this. The one thing we hear fairly consistently about economists is that they are what? They're surprised, right? They're always surprised. It seems like a requisite condition. And I always pictured their training, like in a clown school or something, where they spend their time in front of mirrors practicing their, like, surprise faces. That's what I pictured. This economist is different. Kevin Freeman is considered one of the world's leading experts on the issues of economic warfare and financial terrorism. He's consulted for and briefed members of both the U.S. House and Senate, past and present CIA, DIA, FBI, SEC, Homeland Security, and Justice Department, as well as local and state law enforcement. His research has been presented in critical Department of Defense studies on economic warfare, Iran, and weapons of mass destruction. Kevin is also a New York Times best-selling author. His books include Secret Weapon, How Economic Terrorism Brought Down the Stock Market and Why It Can Happen Again, Game Plan, How to Protect Yourself from the Coming Cyber Economic Attack, According to Plan, The Elite Secret Plan to Sabotage America, and his latest, which he has here to sell and sign for you tonight, Pirate Money, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. And when you see the first 9 pages of the recommendations in that book, you're going to be really, really impressed. So, Kevin is also the co-founder of NSIC Institute, which I think, if I understand it correctly, is an antidote to ESG. He hosts a radio show and podcast and weekly show on BlazeTV, which covers the intersection of economics, geopolitics, and national security. In the investment business since 1982, Kevin helped build the Templeton Private Client Group from its inception, ultimately leading the firm as Senior Managing Director, managing $2.5 billion. Most significantly, Kevin is known for being solution-focused. So who better than Kevin Freeman, who is not surprised, to show us the money? Kevin Freeman!
All right, it's a pleasure to be with you. I wanted to brag on my wife a little bit. As an artist, literally, she had a painting that hung in Justice Scalia's chambers for a decade. Glenn Beck has one of her paintings. She painted a painting that Jim Garlow, who's from California, has, but she surprised David Martin with a teaching of the history of the Capitol, as she researches so much. So she's an incredible artist, an amazing mom, my best friend in life. And she's just been such an amazing supporter. I love you, Marnie. And we're celebrating our 26th anniversary. So I'm a really rotten husband who begged her to marry me when I lived in Carmel Valley, and then a year later said, I think we should move to Texas, right? That's a bait and switch. Hey, I've got 5 things to discuss with you. Why it's according to plan, undeniable monetary truth that's about to hit the fan, Doge versus the deep state, 2 threats on the horizon, and implementing a solution. So I've got a book, and I do not have this book with me, but I want to tell you, this is all according to plan. Everything you're dealing with, when you hear about these nonsense, crazy, radical ideas that are going on, why would they do that? That makes no sense whatsoever. No, it's actually according to plan. It is the deep state at work. And the deep state is based on an idea of an institutionalized bureaucracy that's comprised of elitists, and we're smarter and better than you are, and therefore we can control you, and we should. They're all Marxists, whether they know it or not. I mean, you know about Karl Marx, right? He was too lazy to get a job. He actually believed in God, but sold his soul to Satan, literally. And he wanted, seriously, hey, look, I like these people in power. They've worked hard to get in power. I don't want to work hard. I want to convince other people to put me in power, and then I want to control them all. He was a ne'er-do-well, absolute terrible. I just had Jim Simpson, who wrote a book about Karl Marx. Who was Karl Marx? Marx and Satan by Richard Warren Branch. I mean, the guy was a terrible human being. And that's the same ideology that the elitists are using today in your state, in my state, and every other state. There was something written in 1958. It was called The Naked Communist. It was written by a man I knew as a kid. He was a friend of my dad's. His name was W. Cleon Skousen. And he wrote The Naked Communist. And in that book, they had the 45 goals of Communist Party USA. And if you read those goals, you would be reading the headlines of today. It is like convince little boys and girls. It's like make art ugly. It is like capture one or both political parties. It is like control the media. All of the things that we've seen happen. This was entered in the congressional record in 1963 by a Florida congressman. You can go back and read it and then remember what it was like 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And you will come to the same conclusion that I have. It's all according to plan. It's the flower pivot strategy, which was created by David Horowitz, wrote about this, and my friend Jim Simpson taught it to Glenn Beck, and basically it is, we're going to overwhelm the system, crisis after crisis after crisis, with bad resulting responses will lead us into a Marxist society, and the elites will be in charge and they'll rule everything. So they've institutionalized this as compassion. That's the point. Oh, it's compassionate. It's compassionate to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. Did you see, I'm sure you did, everybody saw, the fire chief in Los Angeles who says, you want to get someone to rescue you, you want them to look like you. Okay, tell that to a 110-pound woman. You want a 110-pound woman to carry you out of the burning building? No, of course not. I did see the Gates for Trump post on this, where he said, no, I want my fireman to look like this, and it was the hunk of a man fireman. The point is that this nonsense designed to look like compassion with the point of control. It's environmental worship. The Delta smelt. This is insane. I read on World Daily they can't even find the Delta smelt anymore, and yet it's caused Los Angeles to burn to the ground. And then there are the rules for me, but not for thee. That's why the Paris Climate Accords, the only country that appears to be in any way following them is the one that's not following them. That's the United States. All the other countries want us to follow the rules that they won't follow. The same as Al Gore, who has the biggest carbon footprint of any human being in America, and he wants us to follow all of those rules. And they put immigrant over citizen. And the proof of that is immigrants get free college. Why is that? Why should they get preference over the citizens that are building and paying the taxes in this country? And they get exempt from criminal charges, and you can be charged with anything. I met someone here from Calvary Chapel. You get charged because you didn't close your church. This is insanity. No, it's not. It's according to plan. It is intended and purposed to destroy this country. It's devastating in practice. The purpose of it is wealth redistribution. The purpose of it is control. The purpose is to bankrupt the old system so they can put in their system. It's catastrophic failure and collapse of the police, of the fire, of national security. And guess who it's funding? Trevor Loudon. You had Trevor as a speaker, I think, here. Dear friend, he'll tell you it's being funded by the communists worldwide, who have their stooges here that they fund. And so they do stupid things, like they'll have, somebody will leave the EPA and go start an environmental group, and then the environmental group will sue the EPA. The EPA will settle with them, and they can put in law something that they couldn't get passed by elected representatives. It's the force of law. It's sue and settle. All right, my background, and Jane mentioned it, I have 40 years in the investment industry. To me, I understand money and investing. And I got to tell you something. If you're a Bible believer, Jesus said, if you can't get the money part right, nobody's going to trust you with true riches. That is what it says in Luke 16:11. He said, if you're not faithful with your unrighteous mammon, you will never be trusted with true riches. Money is a reflection of our hearts, what we do with money. Money's a tool. It's something God's given us that we can do exchange. I'm going to talk to you about money because at the end of the day, all of this is economic warfare, and all of it is intended to control you by money and to take your money. Look, here's the undeniable monetary truth. We are on the Titanic, and it is headed straight for the iceberg. That's the undeniable monetary truth. It's absolutely true. I'm going to tell you, it's not me saying it. It's Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve. He says our government is on an unsustainable fiscal path. What does that mean, unsustainable fiscal path? Well, I wrote this book over here. It's my most recent book. Came out, and I wrote The particular chapter that I put the USDebtClock.org in June 24th of 2023, we had $32.1 trillion in debt. I looked at it a couple of days ago, it's $36.3 trillion. In other words, our debt's up $4.2 trillion. How many people in here are taxpayers? Regulated for taxpayers. Your portion of our federal debt went from 249,951 to 323,000. It's up 73,000 in the last 18 months. $73,000 for every taxpayer. Every man, woman, child, anybody that's a citizen in this country, their personal portion of the debt went up $11,000. So when Joe Biden tells you the economy is pretty good, sure, because you're printing money and giving it away, and you're giving our money away. So of course it seems rather, it doesn't seem all that good, does it? And how do they do this? Where does that money come from? Well, let's ask Jerome Powell. 60 Minutes did, and Ben Bernanke, who was the Fed chairman before him, not immediately, but before him, and Neil Kashkari, who's the Fed president. Let's see what they have to say about where the money comes from.
You simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did.
So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
You've been printing money.
Well, effectively.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digital.
Flooding the system with money.
Yes, exactly.
And there's no end to your ability to do that.
There is no end to our ability to do that.
All right, that is their answer. That's their answer to everything economic. What does Elon Musk say about that? He said, if we don't do something about our national debt or dollar, the dollar will be worth nothing. Do you know we're paying $3 billion a day just in interest? Interest only, $3 billion a day. Do you know that the Congressional Budget Office, they project that we will add $100 trillion to our deficit in 30 years. $100 trillion. And you know what? That doesn't include any possibility for war or pandemic or recession or any other problem, because they're forbidden by law to consider that. But they have a solution. They know what to do. It's print money. I have a question for you. Let's see if you can answer this question. Jared Bernstein was asked this question. The question is this: do we print money? Yes. You just heard it. We print it digitally. Do we borrow money? Well, I just showed you we are $36.3 trillion in debt. Why does the government that borrows money have to print money, or print money have to borrow money? Isn't that a fair question? Let's ask the smartest economist in the Biden team, Jared Bernstein.
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah, so a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to, yeah, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, because it's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
All right, I'm going to tell you a fact. The fact is that until 1971, we didn't really have massive inflation. 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard, and you can see the inflation was bouncing along, and it's really taken off since then, especially during the Carter administration and the Biden administration. And why is this bad? It's bad because we're printing money, and the more money you print, the less valuable it is. That's just a normal law of economics. I don't know why economists are surprised. When you print, the more you produce of something, the lower the value it has, right? That's just economic laws. And what did Milton Friedman teach us? He taught us that inflation is nothing more than too much money chasing too few goods. If you're producing more money than you're producing goods, the price of those goods goes up. And what does that do? It destabilizes society. It's called the Cantillon effect. I'm going to play a quick video here, and it will explain the Cantillon effect.
Have you heard of the saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? Nothing explains this better than the Cantillon effect, first observed by 18th century economist Richard Cantillon. When new money enters the system, it doesn't spread out evenly. The closer you are to the source of money creation, the more you stand to gain. For everyone else, money trickles down slowly, often losing value due to inflation. For the entrepreneurial class who are closer to the flow, there's more access to the freshly minted money because the richest people invest in them. The entrepreneurs can then invest and grow their wealth more easily. And for the ultra-wealthy, they're right next to the money printer, reaping the benefits of new money first, investing, lending, and multiplying their fortunes before inflation diminishes the dollar's value. The Cantillon effect explains that the effects of money printing are felt by different people at different times. This distorts prices, allowing some to benefit, while others are at a disadvantage. The green line in the graph shows that as the total money supply grows, the richest, which is the red line, are getting wealthier at a similar pace, while the bottom 50%, which is the blue line, are not keeping pace. That's the Cantillon effect. It raises important questions about fairness and the distribution of wealth. As the money supply expands, who really benefits? Think about it. How does where you stand relative to the money printer affect you?
So what we do is we do this. We say poor people are poor, so we've got to give them more government benefits. Well, how are we going to pay for those? We're going to print money. And what's that going to do? It's going to make poor people poorer, even when we hand them free money, because the money becomes worth less and less. I can talk to wealthy people, and I can show you 1,000 ways that you can protect yourself against inflation. I can show you, treasury bonds that are inflation protected. I can show you different commodities you can buy. You can buy real estate. You can buy all kinds of things. But if you have very little, how do you protect yourself in inflation? You don't. You end up like the guy with the wheelbarrow here in Weimar, Germany. You end up like the people in Venezuela who have currency lining the streets because their money is worthless. This is the chart that they showed in that short video. And that you can see the red line and the green line, they go up together. That's the total net worth of the top 1/10 of 1% and the M2 money supply. But the bottom 50% of Americans, they have suffered as we've created inflation. What happens? It destabilizes society. Cantillon wrote in France in 1755, and he warned the crown, if you keep this up, the people will revolt. And they did. It's called the French Revolution. And what happened to the king and his cronies? Off with their heads. I'm telling you, they're trying to destabilize America. And they're doing it with our money. And it is according to plan. Government creates a problem, they solve the problem, and the solution always results in a wealth transfer, a consolidation of power, and new problems requiring more government. We were warned against this. There's a British historian, Arnold Toynbee. He wrote that great civilizations are not murdered, they take their own lives. The average age of an empire, not that America is supposed to be an empire. We're a constitutional republic, not an empire. We need to stop acting like we're an empire. But the average age is 250 years. We're about to approach our 250th birthday. Alexander Fraser Tytler wrote in 1776, I bet you didn't know this, he's a Scottish historian, he wrote, and our founders read his writings. And he basically said democracies will only last about 250 years. And again, not that we're supposed to be a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, but that's another talk that I can give another time. But 250 years, why? Because people learned that they can vote themselves favors out of the public treasury. Student loans that are being forgiven, even as Biden goes out the door. You know, the Bible talks about this. Jesus talked about the wicked steward who found out he was getting kicked out on his rear, and what he did was he started calling everybody in that was owed money to the king or his boss, and he started cutting deals. That's what Biden is doing on his way out the door. You know what? Putin's seen this. In 2008, Putin had his buddy, his name was Igor Panarin, and he wrote and appeared in the Wall Street Journal. He said, mass immigration, economic decline, and moral degradation would trigger a civil war and the collapse of the US dollar, and he called our debt a pyramid scheme. You know, we only had $10 trillion in debt. We had a fraction of the immigration problem that we have today. And the morality in 2008 was a lot higher than it is here now 17 years later. We're watching a plan being executed against the United States. And we're about to hit, the monetary truth is about to hit the fan. You cannot continue $36 trillion in debt and $3 billion a day in interest. Okay, so what's the response back? Well, thankfully, the incoming president has something called DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. And there's Elon celebrating the DOGE. Well, I want to tell you the good news and the bad news of DOGE, and then I want to tell you what we need to do in addition to DOGE. First off, we need efficiency, not equity. Equity is a terrible thing. Any of you old enough to have read Harrison Bergeron in high school realize that when you make everybody equal, you have to dumb everybody down. There is no gaining or going up. And by the way, I hate to say this, Department of Government Efficiency, is government efficiency an oxymoron? Reducing bloated government creates efficiency. And we've got to have genuine compassion, not false promises, real sustainability, and we needed outsiders to do it. So I don't know Elon Musk, but I've met Vivek Ramaswamy a number of times, and I'm very hopeful that they can make a difference. Here's the problem. $2 trillion of the goal is almost impossible. Our entire discretionary spending, the part that Congress says we can actually adjust, total $2 trillion. $5 trillion is mandatory spending. That's interest on our debt, which is now over $1 trillion a year. That is not defense, by the way. Defense is in discretion. That is Medicare and Medicaid and government programs. We are running a $2 trillion deficit. If you cut out all discretionary spending, including defense, you can balance the budget. So that's not going to really be able to be accomplished, and Elon admitted that recently. That's a goal. It's a high, unattainable goal, but we can work towards it. Most people don't know what $1 trillion is. If you took all of the credit card debt of every American and piled it together, it's a little over $1 trillion. That's how much we're adding in interest only every year at the federal level. That's how just impossible this is. We could reduce our spending by 10%, or discretionary spending. That would only be $200 billion. But it would be a start. It would be too disruptive to take $2 trillion out immediately. But it is a start, and there are solutions, and I'll talk about some of those. Here's my fear. There's two possible outcomes, two threats that are designed to take advantage of the crisis that we're about to face monetarily. One of those is something we would do internally, and the other is something other nations would do to us. You know, the dollar is the reserve currency of the world, has been since Bretton Woods. It is the primary, most traded, and right now it's the strongest currency in the world today. But I want to tell you, there are elements outside of this country. I told this when I was working in the Pentagon in 2008. I said, look, guys, we've got to protect America. $10 trillion in debt. You guys are going to run this up to 30 or 40 trillion before we can blink an eye, and they're going to attack our currency. You saw Igor Panarin in 2008. We only had $10 trillion in debt. Well, you've heard of BRICS today, right? Everybody here have heard of the BRICS nations?
Yeah.
I'm the guy that told the Pentagon about the BRICS nations. They thought it was an investment theme, like FANG, or like the Magnificent Seven. I kid you not. I said, these are nations that intend to remove the dollar as the reserve currency. I can point you to the documents that have been released to the public that I wrote in the Pentagon. This is economic warfare. Well, only recent, Washington, I said this in DC, when Xi Jinping in 2013 came out and said we want to de-dollarize the world, and the Washington Post sent a reporter to listen to me speaking at the Heritage Foundation. And they came out and read a big headline, oh, no, they don't mean it. There's no way they will ever try to de-dollarize the world. China loves us and there will always be our friend. Well, I'm telling you, Washington Post says here, the dollars are superpowered, Russia and China are the threat. So 11 years later, they admitted I was right. Thank you very much. And here it is, a BRICS currency and foreign policy. BRICS currency could shake the dollar's dominance. Why are they doing this? Well, I'll tell you why. Well, I'll let you hear the former head of the IMF explain why.
Well, how do you see this process playing out? If we are in the process of de-dollarization, what's it going to take for the world to wean itself off that dependency?
Well, the dollar is a dangerous currency, let's put it this way. See what happened to the Russian reserves. Huh? It's been weaponized by the United States. So the United States is the main enemy of the dollar. It has weakened trust in the dollar. So many countries are now seeking for alternatives. Huh? And it is expected that the BRICS jointly can provide such an alternative. Because payments in national currencies, that's fine. But there's a limit to that. You can't go beyond that limit if you don't have a new reserve currency as an alternative to the US dollar.
The use of sanctions is one of the favoured forms of punishment, if you like, for the United States. And to what extent do you think the use of sanctions has promoted this trend of de-dollarization?
Yes, it has. In fact, these sanctions, this weaponization of the U.S. financial system of the dollar has backfired, has weakened the dollar and has weakened trust in the Western financial system. So what you see is countries struggling to find alternatives, to de-dollarize their reserves, to de-dollarize their international transactions, to seek alternatives to the Western financial system of payments. And that's something the BRICS have been working on under the Russian presidency of the BRICS this year.
I want to tell you, in 2008, I was invited. I was working at the Pentagon, and I was invited by DARPA to come in and explain how we could use an economic weapon against other nations. And I said, you don't want me to talk about that. What you need to hear me is tell you that other nations are going to be attacking us, and we need to protect against that. Oh, no, the dollar's permanent, America's permanent. We need to use this as a weapon against them. So here's what happens. Putin invades Ukraine. It's a terrible thing. I think Vladimir Putin is a thug. By the way, I was his guest in Moscow along with 50 or 60 other people in 2006, and where I learned a lot of what he's intending and planning at a conference. And it was a beautiful trip. I got private performance by the ballet, and it was really nice trip. And I heard Madeleine Albright, our former Secretary of State, tell the Russians and the Europeans how evil America was. Wow. And then I heard the former head of the KGB explain, no, Madam Secretary, America is not evil, America is good. And I thought, this is upside down. But I listened carefully, and I understood what Putin intended. And I came back and I told the people at the Defense Department, and they wanted to weaponize against them. You know what we did? As soon as they invaded Ukraine, we just took their money that they put in American banks. We just took it. Do you think other nations would want to keep their money in dollars if we just take it? So he went to India, and we said to India, he said, look, America just took my money. He said, well, yeah, because you did a bad thing. He said, you know what? Russia and China were American allies during World War II. Now we're American enemies. Germany and Japan were enemies in World War II. Now we're allies. How long before he turns on India? Or what happens, you Muslim nations, if we decide that we're going to mandate that you have a Gay Pride Day or Pride Month? or you don't get to use the dollar as a weapon. And with Joe Biden, they feared that. Elon Musk said, if you weaponize your currency enough times, other countries will stop using it. And so other countries don't want the dollar anymore, and they're looking for a way out. That's one threat. The second threat is an internal threat. What happens if we completely collapse our system, but we replace it with a central bank digital currency? Now, I've been talking about central bank digital currency for 15 years. You've heard about them probably in the last 3 or 4 years. Executive Order 14067, March 9, 2022, almost 3 years ago, 37 pages long, said we can make money better, and when we make money better, it will be about control. It will be about DEI and ESG. 134 current countries and currency unions represent 98% of the world's GDP are exploiting central bank digital currency today. Now, what are they trying to do? Let's ask the head, August Carstens, of the Bank for International Settlements, what he thinks the purpose of central bank digital currencies is.
For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
They will have absolute control of the technology to enforce it. You'll hear the same thing from the head of the IMF, Deputy Managing Director of the IMF, Bo Lee, and I won't play it, but what he basically says is it's programmable money. And then you'll hear the same thing from Professor Eswar Prasad at the World Economic Forum, and he'll say, we can control people. We can determine whether or not they're allowed to buy drugs or alcohol or pornography or ammunition. We can determine what they're allowed to buy. This is what central bank digital currency is about. Good news. President Trump says, no, we will not have a central bank digital currency while I'm president. I read through the Bible at least once a year, and I'm now just finished Genesis and I started Exodus, and here's my concern. It says in Exodus, there arose in Egypt a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. And Joseph was very friendly with the Pharaoh, and Moses had to come back, and they didn't get along so well. I love President Trump, but he's got one term left, and we've got to do something else other than just rely on him for the 4 years he's there, because look how quickly Biden reversed so many Trump policies. Okay, so here's a solution that I'm going to tell you. It's Doge plus, plus, plus. This is how we win. As an economist, this is the plan. Number one, we have to grow our economy faster than we grow our government. If you grow the economy faster than you grow the government, the deficit goes down. If you even put a limit on the size of the growth of government for a short period of time and you're growing your economy faster, it doesn't take long and we can get out of the problem. World Bank did a study. World Bank, no friend of liberty, World Bank. They found that a 10 percentage point increase in a country's regulatory burden slows the annual growth rate of GDP per capita by 0.5 percentage point. So the reverse is also true. If you reduce your regulations by 10%, you get 0.5% extra growth. That's the economists at the World Bank. Did you know that Biden-Harris instituted regulations that added $50,000 over 4 years in cost to the average American family? I just looked, my health insurance just went up again. It's now $30,000 a year for a family of 4. I thought at one point in my life that $30,000 a year would be a decent salary. I had no idea that that's what I would have to pay for health care. Did you know that federal regulations have made you 75% poor? This was published in June of 2013. Our GDP then was $16 trillion. It should have been $54 trillion. The growth of federal regulations over the past 6 decades has cut U.S. economic growth by an average of 2 percentage points per year, according to a new study of the Journal of Economic Growth. As a result, the average American household is earning $277,000 less per year than it would have gotten in the absence of 6 decades of added regulations. The median household income then was $53,000. It should have been $330,000. That's what. Now, some of those regulations are good, but wouldn't it be better if Americans had $150,000 of average annual income? It's regulation that's killing us, and it's government bureaucracy that's killing us. This is an Auburn University study that was published in Brownstone Institute. It said every single regulator destroys 138 private sector jobs. Now, y'all are worse off in California than we are in Texas.
Yes.
Because you have more regulators, and you have higher taxes, and you have higher everything. I never thought I'd have to pay $5 a gallon for gasoline. That's ridiculous. The shock is that we have any jobs at all. So how do we solve this problem? Less government equals more growth. Doge better work, because that boat is headed for the iceberg right now. We also need an energy boom. AI can help us. Silicon Valley can help us. New technology can help us. If it weren't for new technology, we would have hit the iceberg already. But AI has the potential of increasing productivity, and productivity helps us grow our economy. But we'll need an energy boom to have AI. It consumes an enormous amount of energy. So drill, baby, drill means drill, baby, drill. We need to expand nuclear power with small modular reactors. We're going to need more power to the grid. Our power grid is in terrible shape. You all have brownouts and everything else in Texas. We have our own power grid. The federal government just took it over, which is a bad thing. So we have to expand and strengthen the power grid. And there's very practical, simple ways to do that. When you say nuclear power, oh my gosh, it's scary. You know, France is mostly nuclear power for their electricity. Oh, the French, who are so much more enlightened than we are in so many areas, right? And yet we won't listen to them on practical things. Okay, here, we heard from Alex about advances in healthcare and bodily autonomy and everything else. MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, plays into this. You know, the highest cost of government is actually Medicare. That's where our money's going, is Medicare and Medicaid and all of the wealth transfers for the purpose of healthcare. Government involvement in healthcare makes it massively more expensive. We need a rational medicine approach. By the way, if people ate healthier foods, we would have less obesity. If we had less obesity, we would have lower health care costs. These are all simple things. You know, the weight loss drugs, those are great. They're very expensive. And they would bankrupt the medical system if left to their own devices. But as the costs come down, they may help. Here's what really would help: price transparency. When you go into a hospital, do they tell you, now for this procedure, it's going to cost you $4,000, but that's not the total cost, because you'll have to pay the doctor and the anesthesiologist and so forth, but the total bill will be $9,000, and that's our offer. Well, let me check another hospital. Do you get that option? No, of course not. Price transparency would solve a lot of these problems. I'm talking to my friend Dave Diaz. There's Dave. And Dave basically says, what if we had competition from health plans across states? Estimate that would cut the cost, what did you say, Dave, in half? Think about these common sense things that we can do. I was with Ben Carson. He's a dear friend. I was with him at AmFest with Charlie Kirk. I was interviewing him. And he said, price transparency solves the problem. He said, I never told anybody what my brain surgery would cost. They just came to me and we just sent the bill. And you don't get one bill, you get 50 bills, right? And you have no idea. But if you could compare costs, he said, I was all in favor of that. He said, you know, we spend $13,000 per capita. He said, I've got concierge medicine doctors who will serve a person for $5,000 a year. And then you just have to get a catastrophic on top of that. You could certainly, with that $8,000, get a catastrophic plan, and you could have concierge medicine for every man, woman, child in America. It's a much better system than what we have now. We've got to reduce health costs by making America healthy again. And we need to make money great again. We have a constitutional historic opportunity to make money great again. Money's going to change whether we want it to or not. I'm going to share it with you, history, founder's view, and then the answer. How many people in here have used Venmo, PayPal, Bitcoin, GPay, Samsung Pay, FedNow? Any of you? All that? Money's changed a lot since we were kids, hasn't it? Enormous amounts. What is money? Money is a unit of account, a medium of exchange, and a store of value. You know what? U.S. dollars are very good as unit of account and medium of exchange. They're terrible as store of value. The founders hated paper money because they knew what it would do. I'm going to play you this very brief video of what the founders said about paper money because they saw it almost destroy America before we started.
Washington said paper money opens the door to every species of fraud and injustice. Jefferson said paper is poverty. Hamilton said to emit an unfunded paper as the sign of value ought not to continue a formal part of the Constitution. The founders hated paper money, so they put a pirate money clause in the Constitution for our state to use. Learn how it works at the Pirate Money booth.
All right, pirate money, you know what that is? When I say to you, gold doubloons and silver pieces of 8, don't you think pirates? Captain Jack Sparrow or Long John Silver, that's what you think, right? That's what our founders thought too, because most of the money that circulated that was real money in America at the time of the founding came from Spanish galleons, and it was Spanish money. It was the double escudo, which is gold doubloon, is a certain weight of gold, and then a Spanish milled dollar, which was a Spanish coin with ridges around it, means it made on a press, and it had almost a full ounce of silver in it. And you could cut it up into 8 pieces, and each piece was a bit. 1 bit, 2 bits. Think of that. 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, $1. Shaving a haircut, 2 bits. That's 12.5 cents. That's what a bit was. And when our founders decided they wanted money, did they pick pounds and farthings and shillings, British money? Of course not. They don't want your oppressor's money when you throw off the oppression. They wanted the most known, reliable currency in the world, which was Spanish dollars. And so they put it in the Constitution. And they said only gold and silver coins in Article 1, Section 10, and no bills of credit, which are paper money. Now that was pretty good until we had a Civil War. And when we had a Civil War, they started printing greenbacks and Confederate money. A greenback meant that it was backed by nothing other than the green ink on the back of the money. There was no gold and no silver. Now, people hated that. And so they fought, and we reinstituted a gold standard. And the gold standard lasted until the early 20th century. And at the turn of the 20th century, there was a politician named William Jennings Bryan. He said, "Don't crucify me on a cross of gold." He was the inherit the wind arguer. He was a Democrat politician, ran 4 times, never won. Did you know that he was also represented popularly in a book that became a movie? He was known as the Cowardly Lion because he was never able to win the day. So let me at him. Did you know that that whole book, The Wizard of Oz, that became a movie, was an economic allegory? Did you know that The Wizard of Ounce, because it's OZ standing for ounce, did you know the yellow brick road represents gold? Did you know Dorothy didn't have ruby slippers in the book? They were silver slippers. Changed to ruby in the movie so that you could see the color, but they were supposed to be a bimetal standard. You were on traveling because Dorothy found herself in an America she didn't understand anymore. It was all strange and weird. And the Wicked Witch of the Northeast, that was the Northeast bankers. And the Flying Monkeys were the lawyers that were forcing the bankers' will on everybody. And the Munchkins were citizens. And even Toto was a teetotaler party of the day. And I'm going to go find the answer in the Emerald City, which is the greenbacks. And I'm going to go to the wizard and see what he has in power behind the curtain. And he didn't have any power behind the curtain because the greenbacks weren't backed by anything. So how do I get out my factory worker friend, the Tin Man, or my farmer friend, the Scarecrow, or my cowardly lion friend, the politicians? How do I get out of here? Click your heels together. You've got the answer. It's gold and silver together. And that was the purpose. How many of your kids read a book about monetary theory? They did 125 years ago in America. Okay, in the 20th century, we did something like the bankers went down to Jekyll Island, which I visited recently, and G. Edward Griffin wrote the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. He's a friend. I've had him on my economic ordering show. They founded the Federal Reserve in 1913. And what they did was they set our money 40% back by gold or silver by law, until FDR came along and confiscated the gold in 1933. And then Nixon came along and ended any gold convertibility, not just for the people, but any nation on earth, and completely removed, on a temporary basis that's now lasted, 54 years, any backing of our money with precious metals. And as a result, the buying power of a dollar is diminished by 90%. Well, the Constitution has the answer. The answer is Article 1, Section 10. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. I'm not eliminating the U.S. dollar, just saying we should have that back as a valid choice. I'm not offering banking. I'm not selling gold. I don't have a gold back, and nobody's paying me to come up here and promote gold. I just know that it has worked as money for the entire history of human beings on this planet. And guess what? There's new technology. Thank you to the technologists, the intellectual property people who create marvelous things. What if you could take gold and silver, put it on deposit in a vault, have somebody keep track of how much you own, and then you could electronically transfer it from you to the supermarket or to the gas station. And you can hold your money in gold and silver while they protect you against inflation, and you could spend them as easily as you use debit card. Would that be convenient? Well, the technology exists today. I want to tell you something. When I pay that $5 a gallon for gasoline, I want to tell you that the price of gasoline has fluctuated between a dime and a quarter for as long as anyone in this room has been alive, and even longer than that. Whoa! The price per gallon of gasoline is between 10 and 25 cents. It's true. Yeah. If you have a quarter or a dime pre-1964 with silver content in them. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Right now, the silver content of a quarter is over $6. Silver content of a dime is over $3. Price of a gallon gasoline has stayed in that range for your entire lifetime. Difference is that the dollar has lost value. Okay, in Texas, we proposed this idea in 2023, and we almost got it passed in our legislature, so we put it on the ballot and said, do you want this? Do you want the ability to have gold and silver as a currency at the state level, be able to spend it with a debit card? And the answer was overwhelming. 1.6 million Texans voted yes, 76.5%. When we tried this in Texas, we almost got it passed, got near to the finish line, and guess what? People wanted it, but we didn't quite get it passed. It was entered by a freshman on the last day of the legislative session, so it didn't quite pass. So I wrote a book to explain it. And I've gotten contacted from 30 states, and we will have legislation entered in 30 states this year, I believe. Wyoming and Ohio and Alaska and Florida and Virginia and West Virginia and Oklahoma and Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana, all these states. California, I'm sorry, is not one of them, but your state is waking up. And you can help me. We can make this known because Democrats like it and Republicans like it. The new treasurer, or the current treasurer in Florida, read my book, and he started a study to make gold and silver legal tender in Florida. And guess what? President Trump tapped him. You're my candidate, run for Matt Gaetz's seat. And he says, all right, I'm going to run, but I'm going to leave this as a legacy to the citizens of Florida. We're going to make gold and silver legal tender in Florida to where you can transact in it. I explain it all. I don't have time to explain all of it, but it's all written in that book. I went to Utah, and the treasurer of Utah read my book, and he funded a study. And in that study, they said, absolutely, we can do this idea, Kevin's idea, we can do it. And on that study committee was a former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve, two senior vice presidents from Citibank and I think Bank of America, the head of the Utah Gold Association, a bunch of prestigious people. Yeah, you can do it. It's the ideal monetary option. It's taking the pirate money idea, gold, doubloons, and silver pieces of eight, and turning it with modern technology. Now, here's the former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve. He doesn't think, by the way, that the dollar will lose its value. He doesn't think CBDC is a threat, and he doesn't think that other nations will take our currency down. But he does think you should have the choice of using gold and silver, not mandatory, but it's an option.
There is no realistic risk that the dollar stops being the world's reserve currency in the lifetimes of anybody on this call. But people should be free to use gold if they want to, if they're more speculative. I'm 100% in favor of that. But if, as part of the legislation, we say we're doing this because the dollar is going to hell in a handbasket, then you're going to have a lot of people who will then say, oh, then I want to go into gold. And then when gold shifts in value, they'll say, you misled me. And we just shouldn't do that. We should just simply establish this on the grounds of we're providing options for our citizens, as opposed to we're preparing for the end of the United States as the global reserve currency.
Okay, I agree with them on a lot of things. But here's a choice. I can give you a 100-year-old $20 bill, or I can give you a 1 ounce of gold that was worth $20 100 years ago. Which would you rather have? What if you could spend it? Here's me spending it in Florida.
We just landed in Florida. It's so exciting. We're at my favorite grocery store, Publix, and I brought my gold escudo. This is a gold doubloon. It's got over $100 worth of gold. I'm gonna go see if I can buy some oranges with this. Let's see if it'll take my gold. These delicious Florida oranges. There we go. And where do I put the coin? Oh, I'll just use my Glint card and pay that way. There we are on February 2nd, Publix supermarkets, 3 p.m. I paid $5.99 with 0.0914 grams of gold. Success! Florida oranges. Bought with gold, paid by Glint.
That's what technology can do to a gold standard, personal gold standard. Other nations, they're stockpiling gold. Why shouldn't you have that option? The Basel III regulations for banks say that gold is a tier 1 asset, a zero risk asset. And so people know this, and they've been going to Costco and buying gold bars when they're available. What do they do to spend them? Well, they have to go to a pawn shop. What if we could instead make it possible for you to get paid in gold and silver, pay your employees in gold or silver, pay your suppliers in gold and silver, write contracts in gold and silver as an option available when you wanted to or needed to? Would you like that option? Yes. It's just another way to pay. It can be enacted now. Now, why does the state need to do this? 3 reasons. You got to be able to trust where you're getting the gold, it's real gold. You don't want to pay tax if the gold appreciates in value, which is a capital gain under current tax system, and you don't want the federal government being able to take it. Well, we have court rulings from the last 150 years that say everything I'm telling you, and they're in the book, it's all constitutional. It can be done. And we have grassroots support ranging from David Barton, Wall Builders, Charlie Kirk, and Turning Point Action, Citizens Defending Freedom, Patriot Academy, Recover America, Association for Mature American Citizens, Liberty Pastors, State Financial Officers Foundation, NACL, National Association of Christian Lawmakers. We've started a movement. And my job is to help educate America. So I do this on Economic War Room television show on BlazeTV. I do it on Pirate Money Radio, which airs on 250 American family radio stations every week. I do it with books and educational briefings like this. So how do we fix the problem? We got to make money great again. And the last thing I need to tell you is we need to return government to the people. And compassion needs to go back to the church. The church ought to be invited into Southern California to help people who have lost their homes. It shouldn't be a big government check every time something bad happens. It should be us showing compassion to our fellow humans. So wherever possible, we should feed and shelter at churches. You know, they make it illegal to do that. I'm on the board of First Liberty Institute, Kelly Shackelford. We're fighting where they're making places where Brother Dave wants to have people come and he wants to care for them, feed them, care for the homeless, and the city came in and shut them down, said you can't do that. We should have personal disaster response. It should be state over federal, local over state, and private charity over government. This is how we solve the problem. Now, am I a pessimist or an optimist? Well, my knowledge is pessimistic, but my willing and hope are optimistic. And that's outreach largely. Look, you can follow what I do by taking this QR code and signing up for our battle plans at Economic War Room. We have an ideal monetary option. I'd like to sell you a book, Pirate Money, and the books are $10 each, which is a discount, and it's payable in gold, silver, or cash. Now, I want to close with this, because it is an impossible situation we're in. It truly, truly is. Monetarily, unless we do those things that I described, that's our one narrow path out. If you're a Marvel movie fan like I am, you'll remember Doctor Strange held up his finger. There's only one way out of 14 million ways out. And what I just described is it. But does that mean we should give up? Is it impossible? Let me tell you a very brief story to end. And that is the story of Dunkirk. Have you seen the movie Dunkirk or Darkest Hour? Let me tell you a story you did not see. There were 300,000 men that were trapped there. And Churchill said, I want a status report from the commander of Dunkirk. Tell me, what's the status? And the commander of Dunkirk responded back with a 3-word cable. But if not. Now, you may recognize those 3 words. Those 3 words were uttered by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, about to be thrown into the fiery furnace by Nebuchadnezzar, because they would not bow down to the statue. And they're tossed into the fire. They said, our God will surely deliver us. But if not, we will not bow our knee. This is what they said at Dunkirk. We will get delivered, but if not, we will not bow our knee. We won't bow our knee. You didn't see this in the movie. King George VI, the father of Queen Elizabeth, the grandfather of King Charles, the brother of King Edward, who had to navigate the throne because he was marrying an American divorcee named Mrs. Simpson, Wallace Simpson. He, by the way, was encouraged to marry her by Winston Churchill because he was a Nazi lover, and they had to get him out of Buckingham Palace and replace him with the King's Speech King who couldn't talk. Yeah. If you saw that movie. Yeah. Well, King Charles said, we're going to call for an empire-wide day of fasting, prayer, and humiliation, and begging God to save the British Empire, because the entire British Expeditionary Force, 300,000 men strong, were trapped on this French beach town. And there was no hope. They thought if we could get even 1,000 of them home, it would be good. Because Hitler's going to race across the channel, and he's going to invade England. And that's why we should fight them on the beaches. You notice they didn't have to? Why? Because they got them in home. But how did they get them in home? You know, when he called for prayer, they lined up for miles outside Westminster Abbey. Miles of people standing in line to get into that house to pray. They prayed in India. They prayed in Australia. They prayed in America and Canada, any English-speaking part of the world or anything touched by the British Empire, and they begged God to save the nation. And God answered. He answered with 3 specific miracles. The first one was the tanks that were rolling in to Dunkirk stopped. Stopped. Nobody knows why they stopped. Some people believe that Hermann Goering, the head of the Luftwaffe of the Air Force, German Air Force, said, Herr Hitler, we can bomb the beaches from the air, so don't get the tanks musty, because he wanted to get the Air Force in. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was that Hitler just all of a sudden went in a fit of madness and stopped. But whatever reason, he could have rolled in and wiped them out. He stopped. And the second miracle was, Goering got 1 squadron off to strafe 1 beach. This is recorded in A Trumpet Sounds from Britain by David Gardner, and also by Rees Howell in his book, The Intercessor. 1 squadron took off to strafe 1 beach. Guess what? All the men dove into the sand, surely were dead. And afterwards, every man stood up unharmed. Every man stood up unharmed with bullets lining their body. And they swore testimony that angels lay on top of them. Isn't that amazing? I think God had enough of the air attack because he dropped a fog on Flanders Field so thick that planes could not take off or land. And the third miracle was that God made the glassy smooth, the English Channel glassy smooth. Because Winston Churchill had called Operation Dynamite, and he had instituted every pleasure craft, fishing trawler, steamboat, every civilian boat was then brought into the Navy, and the little ships went across the channel. Why did they need the little ships? Because the English destroyers could not go into the shallow waters of Dunkirk to pick the men up. They had to park offshore. They couldn't get in, but the little ships could, and they did. And guess how many of the 300,000 plus men they brought home? 300,000 plus men. And here's what happened. Winston Churchill greeted the boys, welcome home boys, and he came to the microphone and he said, wars are never won by retreat. And that's true. Dunkirk was a retreat. He said the battle for France is over. The battle for Britain has just begun. And I hereby order every British citizen to mobilize immediately for the Battle of Britain. And King George VI said, excuse me, Mr. Prime Minister, I countermand your order. We're going to take one day off and give thanks to Almighty God for saving the British nation. And then we'll begin our preparation. And that's what they did. What do we need to do? Because our situation is absolutely dire, whether it's the loss of Southern California to fire, or whether it is the loss of our liberty to a forced mandated vaccine, or a shutting down of church, or the overwhelming threat of a budget deficit that will bankrupt us. What do we need to do? We need to come together. We need to pray. We need to do our work. And then when we have victories, we need to be thankful to God. So I've got a property in Texas. It's called Liberty Hawk Ranch. And at the top of it, we have a prayer cross. And Liberty Hawk Ranch, let me tell you, we have the Dunkirk Advance Center. Because we don't retreat either, we advance. And our advance tonight is pirate mining. God bless you and thank you.
Okay, let's get started with questions. By the way, I wore my debt clock tonight for Kevin, but my debt clock hadn't been turned on for a while. And when I tried to hook it up to the internet, I guess it's a night of technical difficulties even in my house. There are gremlins afoot. But when I turned it on, it was stuck at only 35 trillion, right? Since I turned this on last time, we've gotten $1 trillion deeper in debt. Do you know $1 trillion? If you stacked up dollar bills, if you stacked 1 trillion of them up, it would go up to 60,000 miles above Earth. Yeah.
That's 1 trillion.
That's 1 trillion. Okay, we're going to have a flurry of snowstorm of questions up here in a minute, so let's go. Please explain how the Federal Reserve has authority.
Federal Reserve Act in 1913 passed by senators that attended the Jekyll Island confab was given authority by Congress. People question its constitutionality, but I will tell you that the courts will rule it's constitutional because it exists and has been in place for 112 years. It's a Congress basically gave their power to coin money over to the Federal Reserve, which is a quasi-governmental institution. It's really private banks, but it's headed by political appointees in like the Fed chairman and so forth. That's their authority. It was granted them by an act of Congress.
Wow. Okay. Could you speak to how our economy used to be based on making things? You made things to make money. And then it seems to shift to make that you use money to make money. And we became basically the financial sector that used to serve us, we became our masters. Could you speak to that?
Financialization, which is that, using money to make money rather than to make things, began in 1971 when we no longer had to have any metal backing our dollar. And the growth of financialization is part of that Cantillon effect. where you can use money to make money with derivatives and so forth. It almost collapsed our system in 2008.
Right.
It's designed to protect our system, they tell us, but it's actually designed to manipulate the system. Banks have quadrillions of dollars worth of derivatives backing them. It's a very dangerous situation. It's made possible because you don't actually have to have anything behind the money. And so that is a threat to our well-being in the future, but it's a control mechanism. What happens when you have central bank digital currency, where you're printing money digitally, but it's programmable? That is the ultimate financialization. We started exporting our manufacturing with financialization, and we thought if we own the financial system and the reserve currency of the world, then China can be our manufacturing supplier, and we can get our materials from South America and from Africa and so forth. And we stopped mining in the U.S., we stopped producing in the U.S., and the net result of it is the wealth gap that I explained to you from the Cantillon effect. And it is unsustainable as a nation if other nations stop accepting the U.S. dollar. Will that happen in our lifetime? I don't know. But right now, that's what's happening, is other nations are threatening to stop using the dollar. If they stop accepting the dollar, where will we get our lithium? Where will, for our electric cars, where will we get the materials that we need? We need to go back to creating, building, and manufacturing here in America. It's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Questions from the audience about China. Well, one is California intentionally being driven into receivership? Is it planned for China to own California? I think I'll let you answer.
Let me just address that one. I don't know what the plan is to own California, but I will tell you there was in the book, my book, According to Plan, General Xi from China said in 2004, 2005 period, it would be indeed brutal to kill 100 million Americans. But if that ensured the China century, it would be worthwhile. And in that same speech, he said China's ruined the environment. The air is polluted, the water is polluted, but America is a pristine land. And we Chinese built America, and therefore we have a right to go take it back. And it belongs to China. And where would they start? They start with California. So there are elements in the Chinese Communist Party. By the way, the Chinese people are wonderful people. When I visited China, I loved the Chinese people. John Templeton used to tell me how wonderful China was and how capitalist China is and how terrific people and the economy could be. It's the Communist Party that's the threat. That's the problem. Just like the Communist Party in America that parades as one of the two political parties. I will not name which one. They're the threat to the American people.
What is to prevent the government from taking our gold again if we have a deposit, like in 1933?
Brilliant question. 1933, FDR wrote an executive order that said, because gold is being hoarded and it's not transactional, I will take it. Well, first off, we want to make it transactional, so that's a good move in the right direction. But secondly, you'll notice in his order, he did not include taking state-owned gold or silver. He didn't taking state-owned gold because he had no constitutional authority, because the Constitution, and it's very plain. There's a court case called Lane County versus Oregon, where the state of Oregon demanded that taxes be paid in 1870 in the form of gold. And yet we had greenbacks. And it said this note is legal tender for all debts public and private. So the county of Lane County, sued the state, said, we're going to pay you in greenbacks. They collected in gold and wanted to pay in greenbacks. Well, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that the federal government has no authority to interfere with the state's ability to make gold and silver legal tender. They have no authority whatsoever, no bureau, no Congress, no court, no politician at the federal level has a right to interfere with that state's right. That is good law even today. And it's Article 1, Section 10. So we would stand up and fight them. Our Attorney General in Texas has told me personally, Ken Paxton, he said, I will sue them until they give, because we will not let our gold be taken.
That's amazing.
Would you all like to hear from Ken Paxton here at the platform? Let's switch over for a second to crypto, or questions about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is defined for two things. One, we had Aaron Day here, which was really a lot of fun. He's his babysitter in digital money. So what is, we understand that Bitcoin itself has been compromised. It's no longer sort of a way to exchange and freedom. But can you talk a little bit about where things are standing with that?
Yeah, Bitcoin is a wonderful invention. It's marvelous and wonderful, the blockchain and all of that. And I wrote a whole chapter in my book. And I'll say, I'll say one thing about what's good about Bitcoin, and then I'll say why I promote gold and silver to be transactional. What's good about Bitcoin is it's limited. Only 21 million of them will be mined, and it takes time to mine them and produce them.
Excuse me, Kevin, could you explain how that's true and who decided that? And how,
That was the way it was set up by the founder, is that we will only mine 21 million. The good part about it, it's limited. We'll get to the bad part about it and why that's a risk. The good part is it's limited. And it has some level of privacy, because if you transact in Bitcoin, not everybody knows who you are. They just know who the coin is. It's on a shared ledger. But who has that, we don't know. And that's beautiful. I love the privacy and I love the limited nature. Here's the problem with it. What if you come along with a better Bitcoin and we're going to make a new one, only this one's going to have 42 million coins that will be mined, or 500 million or whatever. But if we all agreed Bitcoin is it, and not Ripple and Dogecoin and all these others, or any one of them, if we agreed on that, it could be a workable monetary system. You have limitations on it. Here's the problem with it. The government saw Bitcoin and thought, wow, this is amazing. People like it. Look at all the people getting rich from it. We love it. We're going to do exactly that, only our version will be the government version called central bank digital currency.
Yeah.
And we will have absolutely no limit on how much is produced of it. And there will be no privacy. In fact, the opposite. We'll know who does what all the time, and we'll be able to control them through that. Okay, so could we make Bitcoin, federal government could outlaw Bitcoin and take it completely. There's no constitutional protection for Bitcoin. They get outlawed and take it, but maybe Trump likes it. We'll have a Bitcoin reserve and maybe it'll work. I have no problem. I wrote a whole chapter in the book, Private Money, on what I like about cryptocurrencies. But it's not in Article 1, Section 10.
Right.
And gold and silver are.
Right.
And therefore, I recommend that we have transactional gold and silver that cannot be taken away at the federal level from a state. If you're a cryptocurrency fan, you're smarter than I am, because you probably bought Bitcoin at, 10,000 or 100 or maybe even a penny, and you're wealthier than I am. And yes, I would love to talk to you. Let's talk about some good things we can do with all the money you've made. I'm not that smart. I said, yeah, there's nothing behind it. You know what? Bitcoin is amazing, but it cannot be made constitutional money. And that's my answer. We have to do what the Constitution allows us, or get a constitutional amendment to allow Bitcoin. And then make sure that it doesn't get usurped by the next technology that comes along, or beaten by the federal government or whatever. But other than that, it's amazing. It really, truly is amazing. And I'm super impressed with my friends who are smart enough to invest in it. Would I invest in it now? Well, it's not a good store of value. It keeps going up. It's the opposite of a store of value. It's good means of exchange, a good unit of account, but it's not a good store of value because it fluctuates a lot and it keeps going up. It's an investment. And congratulations to those who are wise enough to invest and make the money that you have now. Maybe you should take some out a little bit. I don't know.
Didn't Biden sign a cryptocurrency law that was kind of poison-laced, had things about equity and climate change?
His law
Could
was
that be
Executive
reversed?
Order 14067, where every big cryptocurrency fan cheered. Hey, he mentioned digital currencies, and they were all excited. And then they read the executive order, which is all about how we can use money to control you, and we can take reparations when we want. We can do whatever we want to with money. And then they were kind of disappointed.
Kevin, I think you called it normalcy bias in your book. It's kind of like how now we're used to looking up at the sky and seeing these hashtags in the sky, and we think that's what clouds look like. We're just used to it, right? Because it's completely normal.
No.
But it's not normal what's going on with our money right now. The level of inflation, et cetera, is not normal. What is the mechanism that keeps us from learning from this happening in other countries right in front of our face, from Venezuela and Argentina and Zimbabwe?
I wish we'd learned from Argentina now with Milei, because he said, we're going to go back to conservative policies. And they brought inflation down from thousands of percent a year to less than 100% a year, which is amazing what he's done. We need to adopt conservative policies. Why? It is normalcy bias, and it's the educational system. I remember going to church on Sunday nights and watching Milton Friedman's Free to Choose. It's common sense. Economics isn't hard. It's easy. It's human nature. It's simple understanding of incentives. What keeps us from understanding it now are people like Jared Bernstein that are talking modern monetary theory and confusing everybody. Economics is not hard, it's simple. It may have a lag effect, but if you print more money, you will have inflation. The Federal Reserve says, oh, it's temporal. No, it's not temporal. We have all this extra money, and so prices haven't come down. My hamburger's still $25 at a restaurant instead of $7.
Right.
That's right.
Could you explain how Operation Checkpoint went so under the radar and how we let that happen?
Choke point? Operation Choke Point was the Obama administration who said, we're going to use the FDIC to walk into anybody that does business in something the government doesn't like. A payday lender, or a gun manufacturer, or marijuana business, or anything we don't like at the federal level. And we're going to walk in and we're going to tell the FDIC, hey, this looks a little risky. And the FDIC, when they walk into the bank, is going to say, you know, we're going to evaluate your loans, but the loans you make over here to the gun manufacturer, that's a little risky because they might outlaw the guns or something. And so we think you should not have those loans. It makes your banks look riskier. And so what they did was they stopped lending money to anybody that didn't do what they liked. And what happens then is people had to go out of business because they couldn't get a loan. They couldn't operate in the economy. The modern version of that is being canceled from your bank at the individual level where you are too risky. My friend Nick Vujicic, he wrote the foreword of my book. He's a man born without arms or legs. You know what he does for a living? He travels the country, literally travels the world. And he tells people, you have a reason to live. He's particularly popular in high schools where there are a bunch of girls who say that my hair doesn't look right, it's not the right color, I have a pimple on my face or whatever, nobody loves me, I'm not going to do this. And he stands on stage, he's about this tall, he has no arms or legs, he's got one little flipper, and he kind of waddles across the stage and he gets up and he says, you know what, when I was in high school, I didn't think I had a reason to live either. And I was planning one night to drown myself in a bathtub. I would just slip under when my parents were out of the room and I would die. And right before I did it, a janitor came up to me and he said, Nick, God has a purpose for you and a reason for your life. He said, what do you mean? And he shared with him, he shared the gospel, and he said, I have a reason to live now. And I'm going in, the janitor told him, you'll speak to billions of people around the world. And by the way, he's the only human being I know that has spoken to billions of people around the world. And he goes into a high school and he says, look, if you think you have no reason to live, imagine me as a teenager. I didn't think I had a reason to live. Now I have a wife, kids, and a life, and I'm doing what I love. Well, he spoke at a pro-life rally in Santa Barbara. And a dear friend of mine ran the pro-life group there, the Crisis Pregnancy Center, and she came up to him and she said, I think you should help me start a pro-life bank. Why? Because I can't find a bank that believes in life. They all donate to things I don't believe in. And he said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't need it. Unless God gives me a direct and absolute sign, I'm not going to do that. He said it a lot nicer than that, but that's what he said to Betsy, sweet Betsy Gray. And she said, okay, I'll pray. And a few weeks later, he got canceled from his bank because he spoke at a pro-life rally. He shows up in the bank and they said, we don't have your account here anymore. You have to get your money out now. That's the modern version of Operation Choke Point. It's happened to Nigel Farage in Britain. It's happened to Nick Vujicic here. It's happened to Sam Brownback, a former senator here. It's happened to Mike Lindell and a bunch of other conservatives here. That's their means of kicking you out of the financial system. Thank God for Ben Carson and Larry Elder, who started a bank in Oklahoma called Old Glory Bank, which, by the way, I interviewed the founder of and Dr. Carson at AmFest, or Nick Vujicic and Betsy Gray, who started Pro-Life Bank Pro-Life FinTech is the official term, that will have its launch ceremony. I'll be speaking there with Mike Flynn and Nick Wojcik in a couple of months. If you want to learn more about that, see Marnie. She'll get you, they'll have their big launch event. It's going to be a blast. That's Operation Choke Point. If we pass pirate money, we won't have to worry about it. Or if you bank with Old Glory or Pro-Life FinTech, you won't have to worry about it either.
So this is America where this is happening, right? It's
Yeah.
really unimaginable. Do you think the PayPal attempt to find those who were spreading misinformation during the COVID drama got enough attention and did its authors to do that?
A good friend of mine was one of the founders of PayPal, as was Elon Musk, as was Peter Thiel. All three of which hate the fact that PayPal was stealing money or threatening to. If we disagree with what you post on the internet, we're going to take money from your account. That's theft.
Yeah.
But you agreed to it because it's in the terms of service. Terms of service are how they are controlling us. And yes, thank you to the lawyers in this area who came up with the terms of service. And I'll give you one real quick example. There was a man took his wife to dinner at a Disney restaurant, not Disney owned, but a restaurant on Disney property, Disney Springs in Orlando, Florida. She was a doctor. She told them, I have a peanut allergy. They fed her food. It had nuts in it. She had an anaphylactic reaction. She took her EpiPen and she died in the hospital.
Oh, no.
And I say that in horror because I have 2 dogs that have had anaphylactic reactions to nuts, and it scares me as a parent silly. So her husband, after she passed, sued the restaurant and Disney because they promised her it was peanut safe. They'd made assurances. And Disney came back and said, I'm sorry, you can't sue us. Remember that trial you took, that free trial for Disney Plus 5 years ago when you wanted to watch programming at home? You clicked through on the terms of service and it said you would never sue us for any reason whatsoever. If it weren't for the public outcry, they wouldn't have allowed it. And so Disney found out the bad publicity they were getting on my show and many others. They decided it wasn't worth it, so they quickly acknowledged it, paid him off, and tried to shut it up. Terms of service, or EVE,
Yeah.
and the terms of service that you have to click through to use the Microsoft product that you've used for years. Included in Microsoft's terms of services, if we can inspect anything on your computer, if we find hate speech on your computer, we can shut off your use of the services. Let them define what hate speech is.
Yeah.
This is scary.
It is scary. Okay, I could keep you here for 3 hours, but I'm just going to ask you a few more questions and then look at that beautiful line of people waiting to get this book. And you're going to be glad you did, because you'll probably read half of it before you go to sleep tonight. There's a couple of different directions I want to go before we wind up. And one of them is, have you war-gamed this? Because there are a lot of people that are going to be a little bit unhappy about this.
Have we war gamed pirate?
Have
That's
you
the question.
war-gamed pirate?
Well, there's good news in that we have friends that are going into Washington, D.C., and we have support for this being done at the state level. Glenn Beck looked at me and he said, Kevin, you better do this fast. Get it passed fast. And if you live in California, did you know anybody in here have a bank account that's outside of California? Because there are a lot of banks outside California. If you have a Discover card, you happen to have a bank outside of California. Or if you happen to have certain Visas or MasterCards, they're not California banks. It could be New York, it could be North Carolina, it could be South Dakota, it could be, guess what? You can have an account in Texas. And if we pass this in Texas or Florida or Utah or any of those other states, you could have an account there and you could use it there. And interstate commerce rules would require that that be allowed for you to do that. And that would be protection. Have we war gamed it? Yeah, there are forces that don't want to see this happen. And I've been threatened and I've seen people come from the Federal Reserve and question and challenge and the Bankers Association and so forth. But guess what? We have friends in Washington. We have friends in the Congress, in the House, and the Senate. We have friends in the bureaucracy entering. We have friends in the Trump administration. And we have powerful friends that support this, like the treasurer of Louisiana who's going to run for a Senate seat in Louisiana against the rhino who voted to impeach Trump. And Trump has endorsed him. He's a doctor. He's a former congressman. He owns 100 subways and UPS stores. He's a pretty wealthy guy. And he says, We're going to get this passed in Louisiana before I become senator, or Jimmy Petronas, who's going to take Matt Gaetz's seat. We have powerful people who said this is right, and we have a Supreme Court that will defend this, I believe. I don't believe that we will lose Amy Coney Barrett's vote on this one. I believe we will get all the votes we need, and we're gonna stand up because it's the right thing to do. Have we war gamed it? Yeah, we know that there are elements that don't want to see this happen, but we don't care. We're going forward regardless of the consequences or costs, because this is the legacy we can leave to our children and our children's children. It's sound money. It is absolutely essential. And as I quoted Jesus earlier, if we can't get the money part right, nobody's ever going to trust us with true riches. It is an unjust weight and measure for them to continue to print money and make it worth less and less and less. This is a moral issue.
You brought on board.
Most of them are red states. They are people who've read the book. Riley Moore, the treasurer of West Virginia, called me one day and I was like, why in the world's the treasurer from West Virginia calling me? Why are you calling me, Mr. Treasurer? And he said, because I keep getting copies of your book. What in the world is it about? I said, sir, rather than tracking me down and calling me, wouldn't it have been easier to read the book? It's a 4-hour read. I read it on Audible. You can listen to the book in my voice in 4 hours. That's how long it takes to read. He said, I got to know why people keep sending it to me. What they have in common is those are places where a copy of pirate money is gone. And they read it, and legislators, I've never met a guy in Alaska. Senator Kevin McCabe calls me up and says, I want to come. He came and visited us. We had a conference at Liberty Hawk Ranch where we have 45 hotel rooms on property and a commercial kitchen and meeting rooms and all that. We brought him in and we said, hey, let's have a confab. Let's figure this out. Michelle Bachman flew in, was part of it. We had brilliant people. And she's an international tax attorney. I don't know if you knew that. That's her. Anyway, we figured this thing out. It's in the book. It can't be done. And when state senators realize they have that authority, they want to learn more and they start entering legislation.
Could you just quickly say something about the mechanics? I think a lot of people are interested in the mechanics. Somebody said, okay, if I have, gold, do I take it to that state depository?
You can.
Or do I take how do I do it?
Here's the easiest way. I'll show you on my app. It's Glint Pay. It's a commercial application out of the United Kingdom, which means we've got 3 problems with it. First off, do you trust that your gold is held in Switzerland if you can't see it, get to it, or take it out at any point? People, I trusted it with about $25,000 to test, and it's worked great. But it's in the United Kingdom as the corporate headquarters, and I don't like the idea that the British government could somehow take that. I want it here in America.
Yes.
And then it's taxed. I have to pay capital gains tax on every gain I get on it. And what if they take it? So but the mechanics are easy. I connected I sent wired from my bank to a bank in Ohio, Sutton Bank, which is their correspondent bank in America. And Sutton Bank now holds my money. And then whenever I want to buy gold, they send written or electronic instructions to UK, and they connect to the vaults in Switzerland, and they'll buy gold and hold it for me. And when I spend it with my debit card, in milliseconds comes out of my account and gets sold at spot price plus 0.5% to buy, spot price plus 0.5% to sell. Or if I use my debit card, there's no fee. The easiest thing to do is take your paper and do the alchemist trick and turn it into gold on the open market because you're buying, and then you spend the gold or silver as you wish.
And this, excuse me for interrupting you, but this should be easier
if we get it in Texas or Utah or
process will be
Wyoming just called us. Wyoming's one of the 30 states. It'll be closer. Nevada is looking at this. So it should be much easier. You can buy it plus spot price plus 0.5%. Now, could you take and deliver gold there? You would, but why would you? Why not hold the gold that you have and keep it? Like I keep dollars in my wallet and I have some in my checking account. I want some of my gold and silver on my house and some of it in the depository. I just want my money held in the form of gold or silver not exclusively, I'll have US dollars too, but my gold and silver will protect me against inflation. The mechanics of it, if you want, while you're in line, I will huddle around and I will buy $10 worth of gold or a penny's worth of gold in front of your eyes using my Sutton bank account, buy a penny or a dollar or dollar and a half, and then you can go to, if there are merchants out there that are selling things with a credit or debit card, I'll buy something in front of you. It works that simply.
Wow.
I just want that brought here in America.
This is so exciting. Okay, well, we're getting a little late in the evening, and I want to give Kevin the opportunity to greet you, to visit with you briefly, and sell books. And there's such a great interest there, Kevin, that's got to make you smile and really pique the interest of our audience here. I always ask for some marching orders. What would you hope that the 250 plus people in here tonight, will do when they wake up tomorrow morning with the information that you share?
Get on your knees and ask God for help for America.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do. I mean, everything that I'm talking about is Winston Churchill and Operation Dynamo and the little ships. By the way, you together are the little ships. It's your responsibility to save America. But you got to start with prayer. Get on your knees and pray to God to save us.
Kevin Freeman says that money is freedom. He says that we cannot let our shekels become our shackles. Kevin, this was a generous, interesting, provocative talk. Thank you for getting us up to speed on all of those. We're inspired. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at the Liberty Forum. Kevin Freeman. Woo!
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please like and subscribe to our channel to get updates on new speakers, and consider joining the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. You can do so at our website. If you don't want to join, but want to support the principles of American liberty, you can make a tax-deductible donation via our website. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and stay free.